specifically, this next panel is called Expanding Local Food Efforts and Access, Partnerships with Faith-Based Organizations. I'm gonna let them introduce themselves, and we have a really good panel coming up now. And so, we have, I think that's it. I'll get off the mic here. Thank you all very much, and Alex, take it away.
Okay, well, hey, thank you, you guys. I know this is like the end of a long 2 days, and I think we're kind of culminating in the last two panels here. And you know, I was just talking to the panelists, and we're gonna change a little bit and pivot what we had originally thought about talking about, because since our planning and over the last couple of days, I think each of us have had a number of discussions and listened to a lot of other community partners that we really want to deepen our exploration about the role of faith-based institutions and you know, faith-led efforts in really kind of helping towards that systemic change of our food system. You know, so I'll just remind you guys, right? I mean, you remember me saying a couple of days ago, yesterday morning, that our systems are perfectly designed to get the results they get, right? And that systems are made out of elements and interconnectedness, and it's the elements and how they interconnect that determine the purpose of a system, right? And that purpose of that system is what it produces, what it actually makes, and what is the output, right? So in our food system, we continue to produce a lot of fruits and vegetables, and yet we still have some of the highest rates of food-related diseases in the entire country. We have folks who live next to and work in farms, and yet do not have any access to those fruits and vegetables that they sometimes pick, that they grow, and that they look at every single day. So this paradox, I think, fits very squarely into this space where we're asking people to move away from a food system focused on efficiency, focused on cost savings, focused on profit, and moves towards one that's focused on care for others, the well-being of our neighbors and our communities, and just this general sense of service to those who live and work in the RGV. So when we have those kinds of conversations, it makes a lot of sense to bring in folks who think and work in this realm. And this is the first time in the history of the Food Summit have we brought in faith-based institutions, leaders of faith-based institutions, to help us think about how.
Cool. You got it. Okay.
Well, even the mic doesn't want to work anymore. It's too late for that. So to help us think about how we move that way. So let me just introduce you our panelists here. I'm going to bring up. So this is John Adams. John is a writer, a pastor, and a spiritual communicator. His work explores the intersection of biblical studies and historical Christian spirituality to help spiritual seekers encounter Christ for themselves in this new millennium. He's the pastor of Like Christ, a spiritual community in McAllen, Texas. Reverend Sarah Solis is the pastor of the Edinburgh First United Methodist Church just down the road here. She is a Rio Grande Valley native and the daughter of generations of farm workers. Sarah was a public school teacher for 9 years before entering the seminary, graduating from a Duke Divinity School, and she earned her master's degree in 2025 with a concentration in Latinx studies and Methodist Wesleyan studies, and then came to work here in Edinburgh. And she loves poetry, and she loves being and working with people. JD is the director of the McAllen Farmers Market, a small 501c3. Some of you guys might have gone there. It's right at the public library. The market has two main goals. It's to educate the community about the positive effects of healthy eating, and also to connect local farms to the consumer. And last year, the McAllen Farmers Market distributed 8,000 vouchers in the Farmers Market Nutrition Program, and the Farmers Market has received both USDA and TDA grants. And in addition to this work, he also works as a contract reviewer, a grant reviewer, where he's read, assessed, and scored applications for different grants related to value-added producer grants and the Farmers Market Promotion Program, and had worked 22 years with the Texas Workforce Commission. And in fact, JD has been also a longtime member of our Food Systems Advisory Council. I've worked with JD for the last 4 years on this council, and only 2 months ago did he tell all of us that he was a licensed minister trained in this. And so we quickly thought of inviting him to be part of this, to be part of this panel. And so I actually just told them over lunch that we had a list of 8 questions that we had kind of agreed on and that we were going to ask, but I kind of asked their permission if we could be a little bit off script, to be a little bit more provocative in terms of how we envision the intersection of faith with our vision of the food system. So let me just start with you, Sarah. You're just down the road. Tell us a little bit about how your church is kind of moving this vision forward.
Yeah, so I'm at Edinburgh First United Methodist Church, and we have the great privilege of hosting the Hub of Prosperity. Technically, we're landowners, or we're landlords.
You're a landlord, yes.
But I just love the Hub so much. And I think it is such a community good. And this initiative was brought on by my predecessor, Reverend Michelle Vernon, which maybe some of you have met. But I love that we have developed this relationship and that you all can use those 5 acres that our church really wasn't doing much with. And now it can be this place of classroom and this place of healing, I think, for the community. And that is so central to what I hold as my faith. This all began in a garden where all were taken care of, when there was shalom, all things as it were. And we live in a world where it's not as it should be. But I love that through the relationship of my church and the Hub, we can play a role in bringing about things as they should be.
And John, you were just mentioning that there was some efforts at your church as well. Can you kind of tell us? Well, let me just back up. So if you guys haven't seen or visited the Hub of Prosperity Farm, it's just like a mile down this road. You can Google it, and you're welcome to drive by on your way back to the hotel. But I encourage you to definitely take a look. Okay, thank you. Is this working?
Yes, it is.
Okay, perfect. So John, if you could tell us a little bit about your vision for some of your initiatives, about what you're doing kind of towards this vision that you've heard the last couple of days at your church.
Yeah, so I am not from here. I grew up in Canada and then in North Dakota, where an ecological consciousness is a little bit more prevalent, and it's a lot more tied to faith. And then moving here is a little bit jarring to see. Our church was built in the 1980s. We're in McAllen, and we have 4 acres behind the church that's not developed at all. And the plan there, from what I understand it, was to build a much bigger church building, and that just didn't work out for our church. So when I got there, there's a field of 4 acres that's basically unused. And over the years, we've tried a few different things. My friend Angie is here. She's planted stuff back there. There was a time where we dug a drip irrigation system. We tilled about an acre. We grew some radishes and carrots and distributed them as best as we could. But we've never been able to find the community partners that we've needed to make that effort sustainable. So until it rained over the last couple weeks, that land has just been like slowly turning to desert, and it's blowing away in the wind, and it's very sad. It's very clearly not a good use of our land. And then spiritually speaking, it's not great care of the earth either, because we have this great property that's right in the middle of town that's not contributing anything to us or to the community. And it's actually contributing a little bit to the heat island effect, because all we're doing is mowing it. And the reason that our efforts have failed over the years is because I've been here for about 16 years, and sometimes church life can be so insular that you're just in the bubble of the people that you know. And that bubble has never bumped up against the bubble of all of these brilliant and talented people who are here. So, when you don't have those connections and you don't know those people and you don't have those community partners, you might have ideas, like we want to turn this into something that's productive and good for our community and for everybody, so we can use the land responsibly as God intends. But you don't have the means or the resources or the oversight or the mentorship that can help you get that project going. And so it's been hard for us. We've tried a few different things, but again, we just haven't had the connections or the support that we've needed to get it done. And I think that speaks to a lot of where a lot of faith communities might be. Like FUMC is a really good example where it's working. But just to be frank, like not all Christians are serious people, but there are serious people at almost every church who want to make sure that their faith community lives up to our ideals. And that's a huge untapped resource for efforts like this, because there are people in most communities who are willing to put in the work and who might even have the resources like the land or the time or the volunteer labor to make a difference. But we need help. Otherwise, we're going to keep reinventing the wheel, and we won't be able to get on board with the efforts that are already being made.
Okay, well, speaking about work, we have one of the foremost experienced person working from the Workforce Commission. What did you do, 23 years, 25 years?
Something like that, yes.
The Texas Workforce Commission, you retired from that. You continue to work on food systems as the McAllen Farmers Market's manager, coordinator. I see you do everything at that market. I'm going to ask you just a little different question, JD.
Sure.
Why? Why do you do it?
Well, when I started working with or volunteering at the McAllen Farmers Market, I felt very strongly that one of the things that I could do was to help the community by connecting farmers and the people who are looking to the vegetables, the shortest possible route, so to speak. And so I did it to try to make that connection. And one of the things that we've struggled with is helping people to get the food. So we've aggressively worked at and sought programs such as the Double Up program, SNAP program, Farmers Market Nutrition program. And this is to allow folks who might not have access to vegetables, fruits and vegetables, to come into the market, get those vegetables. And although I'm not, I was trying to think of, and initially I felt very awkward of being on this panel because I'm not a faith leader, but I'll go ahead and we had this ongoing discussion, and I said, I guess I'm a leader who has faith, because I definitely have that. And so I believe that the way to help people is to give them access to those fruits and vegetables. And if I can ease barriers, remove barriers by either giving people access to those things, then I thought that's the best way to approach it, is to give them those opportunities to access that and giving them that connection.
You know, you talk about faith, right? And I have said this before, like, farmers are people of faith.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking necessarily about the religion aspect, but I'm talking about the act of planting something into the ground and just knowing that in a few years, in a few months, a few weeks, a few years, you're going to get the product, right? Mm-hmm. And what it takes is that constant care and cultivation, a lot of attention, so that it can yield the what you want it to yield, right? And I just think about this also in that definition of leadership that you had talked about, John, right? I mean, John and I were both at the storytelling workshop yesterday, and the definition of leadership, I don't know if you remember, or you can kind of paraphrase what you had written down in your notebook.
Well, yeah, Studio Ruido, they gave us a great definition of leadership, that it's someone who's willing to take the responsibility to create the conditions so that people can, I guess, achieve the common goals that we have. That's as close as I'm going to get without my notes. Yeah.
Especially under conditions of uncertainty.
Right, yeah.
Right? So both of you guys have assumed this leadership role, but then also you are practicing leadership, right? So there's two different types of leadership, right? There's people who say, I'm the leader because I'm the pastor,
right.
I'm the director of a laboratory, I'm the classroom leader, I lead a farmer's market. But then there's the leader as an act, right? Leadership as an act, which is that accepting the responsibility. So, both of you guys, whether I think you've liked it or not, accepted this responsibility. You've accepted responsibility of the hub. Actually, you were bequeathed this, right? So I wanted to ask you a little bit about how your leadership has intersected with your learning, with your studies, and can you give us like some examples of where you see what you've studied in Christianity or in your divinity school, and how it intersects with your activities or what you've seen here? So I'll start with you, Sarah.
Sure. So this is my first year being a pastor, and that has come with a lot of learning. I think one of the major things that I learned about God or the divine is that God is one who accompanies the people. And a pastor, I think about my own leadership as accompaniment. And it is meeting people where they are and walking them through whatever it is they're facing. Whether that is my mother has entered hospice, whether that is we've got a farm on the back, 5 acres. It's walking with people just as God walks with us, with me, with each individual person towards the fullness of life. And how can I think about my faith as, how can I participate with God in this onward journey towards the fullness of life? And how can I help people see the ways in which that God or the Spirit is calling them into that own accompaniment work, whether that's with their families, or I have lots of teachers in my congregation. We have a pretty robust food distribution, food pantry ministry. So as I am walking with my people, I am trying to also help them see who are the people that are walking alongside them. And then how can we foster this deeper relationships? What is in our hands, and what opportunities do we have to walk people towards fullness of life?
How about you, John? Like how has leadership as a role and leadership as an act, how has it intersected with your teachings or even your own learning in your church?
So we live in a world where leadership is usually assigned as a title or as a position, and it's something that someone aspires to and then earns and then executes over others. And Jesus was pretty clear that that was not the way that spiritual leadership works. And he said, even in his time, this is the way leadership works in your world, but we should be doing things different. And he said, the Son of Man, referring to himself, came not to be served, but to serve. And he exemplifies that in a bunch of different ways, from being there for sick people and walking alongside them as they struggle, guiding people specifically through whatever situations in life they're facing. And then at the end of his life, washing his disciples' feet and doing these obvious acts of service for the human beings that are around him. And even in the church world, we tend to adopt the cultural norms of the people that are around us. And so we do have a lot of spiritual leaders now who see it as a position equivalent to like a CEO or a manager or some kind of business leader, and who are missing the service element. And anytime spiritual leadership misses that service element, like I'm here to make sure that other people have what they need to be whole, then we're going to fall short of Jesus' example. And that's okay in other spheres of life. That even he said, this is how other people do it. But within our spiritual communities, we need more spiritual leaders who are really committed to the day-to-day service of people who need help. And just being around the conference for the last couple of days, I'm seeing a lot of people here who are leading the way that Christ would have us lead, by making sure that people have food, by, maybe choosing a career path or making efforts that are very difficult, maybe not as prestigious and not as lucrative, in order to make sure that people can eat. And that's a very Christ-like pattern. And we have work as church people to conform our communities once again to that image of Christ. Not what can the culture do for us or how much power can we grab and use over other people, but how do we contribute positively to the world that we live in. And in that sense, there's a lot of really good examples of people that are doing that here, whether they do it under the banner of faith or not.
That's a good point. I mean, it comes back to JD, when we asked you, hey, can you be on this panel? I know that you expressed to us, you're like, well, I'm not a faith-based leader. I like how you put it, that you accept this leadership role, which is part of accepting that responsibility, as John mentioned, of having people move towards a shared outcome, and in this face of uncertainty. And so you also as somebody who studied this as a licensed minister, how does your faith, how does it intersect with what you do? And as a farmer's market manager, I know that you've already said that vision, right, of why you're doing it. But how did you get there? Like, what is it that connected you and your service with the Workforce Commission, your life as a public servant and as a trained minister, to this work around food systems? Like as a volunteer, for example, you come every month and you're always there.
Every Saturday.
Yes, every Saturday. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the reason why I think ministers minister is because they see a need. The servant's heart of a minister is that you look to serve others, not to be served, but to serve others. And when I went to the farmer's market with my son, helping him set up his stuff, and I saw a need. I saw that the people, the market itself was struggling, and so I said, okay, how can I help? What can I do? And I think that a lot of times we look at a particular situation, we'll look at something and we'll either say, it's too big, too complicated, I don't want to get involved. But you have to have somebody willing to say, I'll do what I can. It may not be perfect. It's not gonna. I'm not gonna know everything, but that servant, the servant's heart requires you to take that step and say, I'll do what I can. And then, as in most situations, you start off with that, and then you pick up skills as you go along. You realize not to do this and to do that as you go along, because it's in my nature to do that. I wish, my wife always tells me, she says, I wish I was more like you. And I say, I wish I wasn't like me, in that I see a need and I have to do it. I can't not do it. And I think that's where my faith calls to me and pulls me into situations where, you know, a better, a normal, a sane person would say, no, this is a bad idea. But I think all of us have that still small voice in us that tells us, you know, and it's no different when you see somebody struggling and you know, see somebody, a mother struggling with kids, and, you know, part of you says, hey, I should help this person. But then the other part of you says, no, I better pull back. And I think that listening to that still small voice, that's God talking to you, telling you to do something when part of you says no. And so for me, working and volunteering at the farmers market and doing it every Saturday, rain or shine, you know, and forums like you wouldn't believe, and different things, and we've added on programs, you know, to try to help folks, and that is just meeting the needs and answering that call to do something, and so that's why I do it, and my faith, it's almost as if it's burning in my bones to do it. I can't not do it. So at some point in the future, I'm going to have to move on and turn it over to someone else, and I'm not sure if I could ever do that, but I have to. I have to recognize that somebody will need to pick it up, because I will not live forever, that's for sure. So.
Well, you know, you guys know, like, I'm a university professor. I do a lot of research, and our lab does it around transitioning to more sustainable practices on farm. You know, really how to advance community food systems. And we do a number of different types of research projects, most of which are participatory in nature, and they're action-oriented. And these are projects, you know, that aren't very common. You know, I mean, a lot of the projects around agriculture research is really how to increase productivity, increase cost efficiency, improve profits, which are parts of an enterprise. Anyone who runs a farm, those are our metrics that we use. But, you know, sometimes it's not super glamorous work because, you know, it's not well funded. We actually, early on, we had this motto in our lab because, you know, I told, especially here in Texas, I told some of our lab members, well, if we don't do it, if we don't do this work, who's going to do it, right? And because, you know, before I got here, there still wasn't any real research on these things, and so, you know, that kind of call, I think, is important to recognize. I mean, you know, thank you for listening to it. And this is the hard part, right? Because I think everyone in this room, they're doing what they can in their various capacities. And I always feel bad to ask people to do more, right? Because we're tired. You know, one of my good friends on the advisory council, she always reminds me, make sure your own cup is full. Fill your own cup. And then you can feed others. I mean, you could, you know, fill the cup of others, right? And we say this a lot. Let's feed ourselves before we feed the world, right? And so, however, I mean, I think the urgency you've seen over the last couple of days, in fact, the last 4 years, 10 years that we've had these kinds of events, there's a sense of urgency, but there's also a sense of complacency, right? We don't yet have all the partnerships so that we can move forward. We need to ask people to do just a little bit more, right? And yes, we're tired, but who are those right people, right? And we were just talking about the example that we gave at the last food summit. This is a bucket brigade. We're trying to put out these fires on our own. And often when people say, why do you do it, Alex? I say, well, somebody's handing me a bucket, and like, you just kind of got to grab it. And then the moment you push it on to someone else, they feel that same urge because we're working together, right? So I want to ask you a little bit about like this vision that each of you guys have for what you're doing at the church, at your churches, or what you've tried to do and would like to continue. Who do you want on your side to help you and inspire you to either pass a bucket to you and saying, hey, this is some technical advice that we can give you, or hey, this is, give me that and I'll help you with that, right? And so, who are those people or those organizations that you feel like you need to help you advance that part of your ministry? And I'll start with you, John.
Yeah, so before I answer that question, let me just touch on the filling your cup again, okay? So I'm a pastor, so my heart is always going to go to the spirit of the people who are here doing this work. And I know that whatever capacity you do it in, when your life is oriented toward the service of other people, there's a weight that comes to that, and there's an outpouring of yourself, and you get burned out, and you get tired, and you get frustrated, and there's always another bucket coming no matter how fast you pass it, right? And sometimes there's 2 buckets coming, and then there's a third one, and you need another hand. And for me, even though we're not doing the same kind of work as everybody, the work that we do is responding to people in crisis, family in crisis. That's a big part of what we do, is being there for people when they're at their worst moment. And it's fine if there's one person with one bad moment each week. I can handle that. I can pencil it in. 2 or 3 are fine. If it's 5 on the same day and it's the weekend and I had stuff going on with the family, that's a drain on you as a human soul that carries a lot of weight to it. And so for me personally, the way that I've been able to refill that cup so that I have the service and the love and the care to give to other people when they're in their moment of need is to make sure that I'm caring for myself spiritually. And that takes a lot of different forms depending on what tradition you're a part of. But spiritual practice as a daily part of your routine, just like sleep, just like food, just like exercise, just like healthy community, is something that even the research is showing is an important part of being a human who's available for other humans when other people have need. So a big part of the vision of our ministry is to make sure that those tools for spiritual care and the spiritual exercises and the daily routines are available to people who want them so that they can refill what they pour out in life and in the service of other people. And I would just, if I can pastor everybody just for 1 second, talk to me, talk to somebody else, but try to find someone who can help you develop a pattern or a routine in your life of spiritual care so that you can be more effective at what you're doing. So that when the moment comes where the demands are too heavy, you have resources to pull from and you're ready. And I could talk all day about that, but I won't. What we need is, that's the spiritual side of it, it's the internal stuff, it's the individual stuff. What we need as an organization is we need people with the expertise and the resources to walk us through what doing a project, maybe it would be similar to what you guys are doing with the Prosperity Hub, maybe it's something completely different. We need somebody to adopt us. Our church is young, we have young families, we have a lot of young kids who are there, and they're excited and they have a lot of energy. I have a lot of ideas and I have a lot of energy sometimes, but I do struggle with figuring out how to put it all together into something that's sustainable and that makes sense. So, we need, as a church, we need to humble ourselves and look for wisdom beyond the circle that we're in so that we can fulfill our mission more effectively of actually taking that inner spiritual work and connecting it with the real world in ways that'll make a difference.
Thank you.
So we have 4 acres. Yeah, just to make like a shameless pitch. We have 4 acres. Our church is unorganized enough. We can basically do whatever we want. But we don't really know how. And we've tried a couple different things as just sort of feelers for that project in the past. But we're outside of my area of expertise, like way outside. Being here at the conference, I've learned so much about what y'all do that, there's no way doing it the way I was doing it. I would catch up to the knowledge necessary to make it effective. So we're willing to work with partners. If anyone has an idea, we got 4 acres in McAllen, and we want to use it for good. And if that's feeding people or planting native trees or a little bit of both, making it a community space that people can use. But we need that guidance and that support.
Yeah, that's great. John. Well, you were here yesterday, so you're not the first person to come up on the stage and says, "Please adopt us."
Okay, you're right.
I
Yeah.
mean, Deanna Padilla was here. It's like,
Yeah.
adopt a farmer.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think there's some natural partnership with folks who are aspiring farmers. There's a lot of young people who are looking for land.
Yeah.
Land in especially in urban areas is just inaccessible, right? And so like that land access so that we can provision for ourselves and others, I think that is part of what, I'm sure there's a part of your ministry that has that, embedded in it.
Well, we're called like Christ because we want to be like Jesus, and Jesus famously fed a lot of people who were hungry, and so we want to do what he did, and that's part of it. And if you'll let me do one more little soapboxy thing, and then we'll let Sarah talk more than me. But there's, in our culture right now, and I think it's justified, there's a feeling that churches aren't doing enough because we have these ideals of helping people and being charitable. The word charity is a Christian word, comes from the Greek word charis, and the early Christians were all about making sure the people in their communities got fed. That was like before they built anything, before they hired staff, their main commitment was that people would eat. That's like our Christian heritage. And we're right to be critical and to point out that the church is not doing that. What we need are a few more projects that are successful to give that vision to other people. And I really think that if a few faith-based organizations can do that effectively, and we make a lot of noise about it and we tell that story effectively, it'll be something that culturally other church people come to demand from their leadership and from their organizations. And so we just need people to go first and show that it's possible and show that it's good and show that it's beneficial, because like I said, there's a lot of people in churches who want that to be what their community represents, and they don't really know how to get there.
Now, Sarah, you have been, a really welcoming landlord, and you've seen in your year's time with the church, you've seen the hub, you've been on our tours. What do you think your church needs to be able to either institutionalize that or scale up? Who are the partners you need, or what are the structural, operational, municipal barriers that you could use help overcoming?
Sure. So I think Edinburgh First is really fortunate in that we are resource rich, and not necessarily in terms of money like a lot of organizations, but we are rich in the resource of relationships and partnerships. And so I think we have this really unique thing going on because we have the hub, and then we have this food distribution, food pantry system. And what I love about our food distribution system is that we ask no questions. We take a whole foods approach, and so every month we give chicken, culturally relevant dry goods, and then produce. Currently, we're buying our produce from Busterland just because of money. But what I am trying to get started or explore is how can, the system that we already have in place at the church, we have people that we feed every day and every month. How can my church support local growers like the hub, but others too? So, but also pay you all what you deserve, because you're doing it in sustainable, responsible ways, and that's kind of countercultural. But how can we also, because in seminary we talked about the church as this alternative society, so how can we also do the alternative society countercultural thing in supporting the good work that local people are doing? So that's a part of it.
JD, like with your organization, how do you think you can leverage the momentum of faith-based organizations, or even partner with them to augment the reach or the mission of of the farmers market?
Yeah, I was thinking about that as you were talking, and so we have a couple different programs that we run. One of the ones that I think has the biggest impact is the Farmers Market Nutrition Program, and that program is giving vouchers to WIC recipients, eligible WIC recipients, to buy fruits and vegetables. So as you mentioned, last year we did right at about 8,000 vouchers, dollars in vouchers, 8,000 vouchers. And it sounds like a lot, and it is, and we had about a 60% redemption rate on those vouchers. And so I think for us, what we've identified is that people don't know what to do with the vegetables that we have. So people come into the market, and we'll get moms and kids and folks, and they'll be looking for plums, they'll be looking for peaches, they'll be looking for fruits and vegetables. And unfortunately, the Valley doesn't grow a lot of fruits and vegetables. We grow kohlrabi, we grow kale, we grow those types of fruits and vegetables. So people don't know what to do with them. So we've tried to institute cooking demos to show people what to do with things. And that is partnering with UTRGV dietetic students. And they'll come out once a month and do a cooking demo and show folks how to prepare something. So if we could find somebody that would be willing to do an additional 1 or 2 demos per month, and we'll pay for the ingredients. We'll pay for the ingredients. We've already got the equipment. We've already got everything there. We just need somebody to be chef for an hour. And the nice thing is that this chefing does not require a food permit, doesn't require any specialized skills. It just requires somebody with a heart to do the work. We're not going to ask you to do fancy knife work. We're not going to ask you to go ahead and do flambe. Just to show somebody how to take kohlrabi and make it so that they can eat it. Now, there's only one catch to all of this, and that is that when you get done doing it, we don't give out samples. So we go ahead and we videotape it, we put it on our social media, but we don't give out samples, and that's because in order to give out samples, we need to have a food permit, need to have a special event permit, and that requires a whole set of other things. So we just don't do samples, and we're perfectly okay with that.
Bummer, man. Those samples at Costco, they get me every time.
I know.
I think the samples is key. Maybe there's somebody, legislator in the room that can kind of work that into something. Because I do think being able to taste it. Now, I'll say this. When it's cauliflower season, I know 2 young ladies who love cauliflower. You saw them on the panel yesterday. So we'll probably have to call them up, and they maybe can help you with the cooking demo.
Sure.
So, I was telling you guys earlier, I was raised Catholic, and I went to Catholic school for my entire life, and actually was going to go to a Catholic Jesuit college before, I chose a different path. So, I want to think about it more even on a daily level about how I can connect. But there are some questions that I have, especially as I become an adult, and there aren't people kind of instructing me anymore. That I'm kind of starting to think about things on my own. As I learn more about food systems, I realize just how about all the kind of the connotations of our conventional food system, right? And you heard me talk about it yesterday, right? This kind of subsidies against the land and the people who work on the land. There are harms to the environment, extractive practices, that none of which are Christ-like, right? To use your words, John. So how far can you push that in your congregation to ask people to really be more cognizant about food systems, because in doing so, you really ask them to question, well, what's the better choice? Or how can, my spiritual cup is full, how can I do more personally, right? And I think about that a lot because, of course, we interact a lot with church members, and, there seems to be a growing interest in faith or based organizations who have lands, who have options. So I'm curious how you guys address that. It's almost like somewhat of a disconnect that a lot of folks have in realizing, oh, well, I'm just going to participate in our conventional food system, when it's really not in alignment with some of the teachings that you guys have in your practice. So Sarah, I don't know if you have an answer to that.
Sure. So this last Sunday, we celebrated Festival of God's Creation and Native American Ministries Sunday. And I think my own beliefs around creation are deeply formed by our indigenous siblings. And creation is central. And so when I talk about salvation, right, or redemption, the healing of the world, it's not just for humans. It is also essentially for every living being. Yep. We impoverish our understanding of salvation or God's will or God, the objects of God's or the subjects of God's goodness to just human beings.
Right.
It is to every living person, every living thing on this world. And I talked about a theologian named George Tinker, who's a part of the Osage community, and he highlights that every living thing, that they call every living thing relatives, so that we're all part of this creation family. And so I talked about that a little bit on Sunday, and I kind of weave it here every time I talk about creation. So I think for me, I'm starting there, is that every living thing is a part of our family. Is a brother, a sister of mine, and St. Francis also talks about this, right? Brother, sun, and sister, moon, and so then that next step is about food. And my tradition, the United Methodists, we're all about the table and the open table, and everybody can come and receive communion. But for me, that's not just a spiritual thing, and for the Methodist tradition, that's not just like a spiritual me and God kind of thing. That also must mean that I must commit myself to, in every way, be an open table for other people. How can I create access to healthy foods for other people? And so my commitment to the hub, what I would love to do in my time as pastor is to institutionalize this relationship, because I learned very recently that, those back 5 acres is probably the first that went from ag to residential to back to ag. Right? And so I would, in my time at Edinburgh First, help accompany this church in creating this kind of agrarian trust, this land trust, that this land will be for ag, and this land will be used in service of community. And so that's kind of like my next steps in accompanying my folks and walking with the hub.
I learned something today. I'm just going to mention it here in front of everyone. I was at the water panel with Sunny Hinojosa, so the panel actually has access to irrigation water, but we were told that we couldn't get it. Now, according to one water master, he's like, no, you have a right to that water. They should deliver it. So as you work this agrarian trust idea, know that water, that of course is life in a farm, we should talk more about how we get access to that, because at the current moment we're using city water, which is fine, but there are some it's a lot more expensive and anyway, so we'll put that on your list of things to talk about, and then let me ask you a different question. John, or did you want to respond?
I just wanted to say that I haven't known Sarah for very long, but I've been sad since I met her that our services are at the same time on Sundays, because I would want to go to her church and just sit there and listen to her talk before I did my thing. And so it's a bummer that we're on the same time slot.
It would make your life easier, right? You could just be like, whatever she said.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
she just talked about like the light and love of God in all things, which is a New Testament idea that gets so overlooked, and I hope everybody caught that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's part of why we wanted to have these discussions, right? It's because, we don't see this side of the food system. And when we were just talking in the back there, we're talking about a transition from profit to people, from transitioning from, raising as much food as possible to relationships, from going from cost savings to care. And this is where, like, I think, as I mentioned earlier, you guys actually have thought about this deeply,
Yeah.
and it would really, it's enlightening for all of us to hear, your journeys. So John and I, you were at the storytelling workshop, and as we were going through those exercises, I actually looked it up at and they credited some of the scholars around this idea of storytelling and narrative and how important it is. But there's a piece that, of course, we didn't get to in the 2-hour workshop, is that the narrative can get the heart, right? But the strategy can build the mind. Like, what is that? What is this? And only until you get strategy and narrative together can you really kind of have a moment for action, right? So let me ask you, and I know this is a question that you haven't prepared for, but what would be we know that you're a great storyteller. What would be the strategy for you to move forward based on what you've learned these last 2 days?
Yeah, so as I was going through the sessions the last 2 days, it became really clear to me, like I said earlier, kind of the mistakes that I made in trying to implement a strategy before. And I heard someone say that when you're leading people, you want to be half a step ahead, because then you're still able to communicate with people where they are, but you know what direction you're heading in. If you're 2 steps, 3 steps, 10 steps ahead, people look at what you're doing and they go, well, I don't understand it, and I don't know how to get there, and they're talking to me in a way that I'm not picking up, and so it's easy for people to check out. So the strategy for us moving forward has to be, we need to be about half a step ahead. So the step we've been on for a little while is communicating that narrative in a way that's maybe new for people, but in a way that still uses a lot of their common vocabulary. Now we're at the point where those ideas have to touch the ground in a real way. And I feel that like very acutely with my specific community. We've done a lot of work over the last few years trying to understand our place in the world and who Christ is and who he calls us to be in better and better ways. And our understanding is at that tipping point where if we don't find a lightning rod and it doesn't turn into like real action and work in the world, then we're going to miss out on a lot of that potential. And we always in religious life we run the danger of making it all about the ideas and the words and the vocabulary and not actually doing anything. So I can feel that sort of tipping point for us. It's either coming or it's already here, where we need to start doing things outside of our church and outside of the conversations we're having and outside of the narratives that we're telling. And as big as I want to dream, we have 4 acres that's just sitting there. You know what I mean? I can't get over that. No matter what other things I want to think about or plan, it's like we've got grass that could be anything besides grass.
Yeah.
And based on what I've heard the last few days, there's so many different routes that could take that would be a benefit to our community, putting their faith into action, and also a benefit to the wider community based on what we produce.
Okay, that's your second invitation to this audience. So
Yeah.
I'm going to extend the invitation right now.
Right.
We have 5 minutes left in this panel. I would love to just keep on learning from you, but I want to invite the audience, if you guys have any questions, I think there's a mic over here, right, Hernan? Or could there be a mic?
All those mics he used.
Oh, he gave it to you.
Yeah, I know. That's
Yeah.
what I just realized it was in my hand. Okay, you know what? I don't need to be on camera. Let's go. I got it. We got a question over here. You got it? Yes. Okay.
There we go.
Hi, my name is Andrea Cáceres. Thank you, panelists, for being here today. I am part of the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe, who is indigenous to these lands. So I appreciate y'all taking the effort to expand the conversations, right? I wanted to highlight, the appreciation that you talked about the Osage, right? And that you also mentioned Native American, even though those two words are opposite. And so I guess the hard question that I wanted to ask is, with the understanding that the lands that you're on, that you all are beneficiaries and recipients of state and church sanctioned violence, how are you all enacting like radical love to encourage the congregants to move beyond land acknowledgements and direct action in land back?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That is something that I wrestle with all the time. Before I was a pastor, I was a teacher, and my education was in Mexican American studies, particularly in the Rio Grande Valley, learning the history, and I think church and church people, we have to acknowledge and name the harm that we have been complicit in, and humble ourselves to build relationships. I have members of the Lipanachachi tribe, and so they led that Sunday worship, and I think it is nothing in terms of decolonization or like land back, but how can we have this kind of Sunday and not center the people who are a part of our community and share. And I think one thing that I try to teach my people based on Matthew 25 is, when you look at the face of another person, you are seeing the face of Christ. You're seeing the face of the divine. And so I would love to have more profound conversations in terms of building relationships with the indigenous peoples here in the valley who are still alive, who are doing work that honestly I think is more church work than a lot of churches are currently doing, to be honest. Defending the land, defending our native flora and fauna, defending our waters. Like that is the call that I see as central to being a Christian and essential to my sense of spirituality. And so how can I learn from the work that's already being done by people who have generationally been a part of this work?
I think we had a question over here.
Partly a question, partly an observation. Have the three of you on the panel sat in a room together and talked before? Because I can see where you would all serve each other's need. So First United Methodist, you want to do more for outreach in the community. Perhaps you help provide some of the things that go to the McAllen Farmers Market. The Farmers Market, I am a chef. I do demonstrations in the Coastal Bend. We don't need a special events permit, but of course that's partly up to the city, the county, the health department. But I know Grow Local gets grants to pay the chef, buy the ingredients. Perhaps First United can pay the special events fee as they're bringing some products to the market that help the outreach. The McAllen Farmers Department gets to have the demo where the samples are at, because samples sell. So that helps your vendors, that helps your people at the market. And I know we've already talked, John, about the goats and homeschooling and things like that. So I look forward to talking to you more about that. But as somebody with 3.5 acres, you have 4, you want to know what to do with it. I honestly think that my farm market model with farm, chickens, goats, education, a kitchen classroom, and I know you work a lot with homeschoolers as well. Perhaps the two churches collaborate instead of trying to duplicate each other. If you do chickens, goats, different produce than what's being grown at the hub, and you put a kitchen classroom out there and you teach these younger kids you already have there what to do, how to grow these things, how to prepare them, the fancy knife skills can come into play. I know the Hub of Prosperity students that were up there yesterday challenged all of us to meet them where they're at. And I took that to heart, so I'm going to try. But they're working in culinary programs, but one of them said that they don't grow it and cook it. And so they don't always know what they're working with. So if they learn younger what kohlrabi is, then they learn older in the Hub of Prosperity Garden. And then those are the very vendors that go to the McAllen Farmers Market, which serves all the people in the community. So I guess my question is, when can you guys meet? You have similar schedules, but can you make a schedule outside of this?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll definitely do that.
Definitely.
Yeah, and we should take a field trip up to see your farm, Gretchen. Okay.
Last question.
I'm the best one too. My name's Elizabeth. I know some of you. I am the director of farm worker advocacy with the National Farm Worker Ministry. So we are a faith-based organization. Our sole mission is to mobilize, is to educate, equip, mobilize people of faith and conscience to support the campaigns that are being led by our farm worker partners, which are farm worker led and elected organizations, nonprofit organizations across the country. We live in an area where we have a lot of farm workers, and we have a diverse set of farm workers. Most recently, we have seen an increase in H2A workers. And this past winter, I did a study with H2A workers. We have about 180 farm workers, H2A farm workers, that are here for the citrus season. And on the weekends, they feel extremely isolated, lonely. It's contributing to their mental health. They live right here in Edinburgh, and it's public information. I can connect you guys, but there's important work that needs to be done with farm workers like them who want somebody to reach out, especially someone who, people of faith who can help them with their mental health, just with an hour or two. There are organizations that we work with in different parts of the country that offer ministries to farm workers, just like the Farm Worker Ministry. And like I mentioned, we create educational material for for faith leaders specifically to share with your audience. So my question is, when can we get you, and one of y'all, to visit some of these farm workers or creators, spark a program in which these HOA workers who are extremely vulnerable to human trafficking and labor exploitation, can begin engaging with them, can create some kind of a program here in the RGV to connect with these HOA workers. You would have you would be welcomed a lot better than a labor rights person who's trying to talk to them about their rights. I mean, this would be a great opportunity to take what you're talking about right now and put it into action with actual farm workers right now that are in desperate need of some kind of human connection with the community that they travel to once a year to feed.
Yeah, let's talk.
Yeah, let's get, I'm in, I know you're probably in, so let's meet up when we're done.
Great, awesome.
All right, y'all. Alex, back to you to close
Yes,
things out.
well, we just want you guys will see each other at the reception, right? After at the Museum of South Texas History, if not before. You are welcome. I'm sure all of these folks are public figures. You can find them in the program and or attend their service, or their service, the Saturday service or the Sunday service. Right? And so, but thank you y'all for your wisdom and your contributions to this discussion. We hope to see you guys next year, although some people want it even earlier, but we're going to try to have this discussion more often. Thank you again.
No, thank you guys. So